Hello everybody, we're going to talk in this video about which order you should learn the different types of scales. This is a follow-up video from a previous video where I talked about which order should you learn your major scales in. This time we're going to take that the next step and we're going to talk about which order you should learn all of the scales. So we start with the major scales, and by the way, I don't like to call them scales. And you might have heard me say this before. I don't think there's anything beneficial to practicing scales. I think you practice keys. And the way we practice and master the keys in my method is with what I call tonalization studies. Now the problem is, the reason I use the word scales in this context is because everybody else uses that word. So when I say scales here, just keep in mind that what I'm talking about is actually learning keys, okay? And we can go into more in that in another video. Right now, we're just looking at the order. And so, yes, we do the major scales first, and then we move on to the chromatic scale. And to be honest, I have them in this order. We start introducing, and if you come to me as a beginner, we start introducing the chromatic scale after about the seventh, I think it's the seventh major scale. We introduce the chromatic scale at that stage, but it's not at the level that we're going to be doing later. So yes, when you master all 12 major scales, then it's time to move on to the chromatic scale, to mastering the chromatic scale and adding it to your, what I call your scale rotation. And by the way, each time you learn a new scale, it's going to go into your scale rotation so that you keep, in the early days, I used to call it maintenance, and I'm very much opposed to maintenance practice. I don't believe in maintenance practice. I believe in increasing your familiarity. It's not maintenance. It's increasing your familiarity, right? So when we do the scales again, it's not because you've forgotten it. It's not because it's gotten rusty. It's not so that it doesn't become rusty. What we're doing when we repeat it again and again and again is we're putting layers upon layers upon layers of familiarity on that key, on that scale, which is extremely important. Extremely important. I think familiarity is far, far more important than quote-unquote perfection. Perfection messes with your mind, right? Anyway, we don't have time to go into that. Second scale is the chromatic scale, and fortunately, there's only one chromatic scale. You don't have to practice the chromatic scale on every note, okay? When you practice the chromatic scale the way I teach, it's redundant to do the chromatic scale on different notes. Let me grab my horn. All right, so let me give a demonstration on that real quick. If I'm doing chromatic scale on C, Okay? We will go up to our top note, down to the low F sharp, and then back to the C again. Now, if I'm going to do that same pattern starting on E, it's exactly the same. This is the same reason why we don't practice modes. In my method, we don't touch the modes at all. We don't do Mixolydian. We don't do Lydian. We study that stuff. We don't practice it. It's good to know it. We don't practice it. Okay? I hope that makes sense. All right, so it's just one chromatic scale. And the reason why we practice it so early in our development, before all those other skills, is because of the benefits we get. It's not just the benefits of being able to play that skill. It's more than that. And it's more than the benefits of being able to play chromatic passages. It's more than that. Playing the chromatic scale changes the way you think about music. It's not nearly as significant as of a change as it is for learning all the major keys, mastering all the major keys. That's a huge impact. Someone who's been through the cycle of different key signatures, mastering them 2-3 times, the way they think about music changes. And I think it has something to do with I think the way other people think before they get through all the keys. I think the way they think is in C, and then all those different key signatures are accidentals. But their home base is still C. Once you've mastered all 12 keys and have been through that cycle, building those layers of familiarity, once you've done that, music is no longer the same to you anymore. The way you hear music, the way you perceive music, the way you communicate music, it changes. And to a lesser extent, the same is true when you master the chromatic skill. I hope that makes sense. All right, moving on. The next skill on our list can be. It depends on the student. And in fact, all of these can change order depending on the needs of the student. We might do one separate scale, let's say the F pentatonic, early before we learn all the rest of these in order, because maybe that student needs that scale now. So you do have to be a little bit more flexible than just this is what we have to do, right? So, but unless something like that comes up, we would normally do the C harmonic minor, not C, I shouldn't have put the word C. We would normally do harmonic minor next. Now, harmonic minor, notice we're not doing natural minor. Natural minor is just a mode of the major. And I just said we don't do modes, right? So you'll notice there's no natural minor on this list at all. The harmonic minor is the one that has the flatted third, the flatted sixth, but the natural seventh. Okay? All right. So now we would, if you're a jazz player, if you're a classical player, both of those need this scale. You need harmonic minor. Once again, it's for the technique and it's for getting your ears to perceive, helping you perceive the music differently. That B natural in this key is important, both for classical and jazz players, okay? So we would, now let me make it clear now. Unless something happens that you need to because of your personal situation, Unless something happens and you're going through these in order, you would need to master all 12 of the harmonic minor scales before you go on to the next scale. Just like you're supposed to master all 12 of the major scales before you go on to mastering. I have to be clear the way I say that. Before you go on to mastering the chromatic scale. Remember, I said earlier, we introduced it earlier. Now, let's say you have mastered the harmonic minor. Now it's time to go to the whole tone scales. Now there are only 2 whole tone scales, once again, for the same reason. It is redundant to practice the whole tone scale starting on C and then doing it again. It's exactly the same thing starting on C, exactly the same thing starting on D, exactly the same thing starting on E. That's because this is a symmetric scale. So there's only 2 whole tone scales, the one that starts on C and the one that starts on C sharp. So this is nice. You can just get it done, right? This is like, now it's a lifetime of work to keep adding those layers of familiarity. And by the way, I do consider the chromatic scale, and remember what I was saying earlier about scales being keys, and I rather think of it as a key. In this case, I'm saying that there is a key called the C whole tone scale. That's how I think of it. I'm actually thinking in whole tone as a key. Okay? Now that's easy to understand with the minor because everyone knows about minor keys. But you know, when I'm writing a composition, let's use a chromatic scale as an example. When I'm writing a composition that's extremely chromatic, I will typically, I don't do this a lot, but I have done it. I will typically think of it as being in the key of the chromatic scale. Like I said, I don't do that a lot, but I have done it quite a bit. And the same thing is true for improvisation. There are times when I say to myself, I'm going to improvise in chromatic. Okay, so hear me out on this, because you guys have heard me say that I don't play scales in my improv. There's a difference between playing a scale in your improv and playing in the key in your improv. Here's chromatic improv in the chromatic key. I'm not playing a chromatic scale. Maybe if I play a sequence of stepwise notes, it comes out as a scale. That's not how I'm approaching it. I'm thinking of it as the key of chromatic. Okay? And the same thing is true for whole tone. I don't play whole tone scale when I improvise, but I might do I'm not thinking, let me play this scale here. That's an improv in the whole tone key. I hope that makes sense. So the next key we will do, next scale we will do, is the pentatonic scale. Now, like I said, sometimes because of, and you know, sometimes it's the student's personality that will make me switch it. sometimes you have those students that you just know that they should be playing more bluesy stuff already, right? That they should be playing either that or more modern stuff already. And we will do the pentatonic scale earlier with those students. Okay, because the pentatonic scale is really, it's the same ethnic scale for cultures worldwide. It's an extremely ethnic scale. And it's really, really cool. You know, anyway, I'm not going to go more into that. There's a lot of really modern jazz stuff that people will play using pentatonic scales and altered pentatonics. We don't cover altered pentatonics and some of the other scales in this. This is for my students. This is a student that's getting all of my bare stuff, right? And in fact, we wouldn't cover any of those other strange scales, the altered pentatonics, the double harmonic minor, which some people call Persian minor, Turkish minors, different. There's like a whole bunch of different names for that one. We don't cover that in this video because this is like the bare necessity that you have to have before you do all that stuff. Okay? So now after pentatonic, we would do the C diminished. I keep saying the C. I should not have put the C in there. I keep reading it. Diminished whole tone. Oh no, I'm sorry. Diminished scale, right? I said whole tone because I saw whole half. I practiced the diminished scale and whole half because that's what sounds right to me. And I remember having a conversation online, and Dennis Dodson got on there and said that he practices it whole half because of where it puts the notes rhythmically. And I couldn't agree more. So, yes, after pentatonic, we would do diminished. And now, I'm going to tell you, all of the scales on here use the same 20 patterns as the bare minimum, right? All of the scales use the same 20 patterns. The exception would be the chromatic scale. And once again, that's because of redundancy. Because if you're doing, let's say, minor thirds, that we do that somewhere else. And I don't like doing exercises twice, right? So we don't do that. So for the chromatic scale, we only do the first, I think it's 12, the first 12 or 15 patterns in the tonalization studies. Other than that, all of these scales do all of them, right? So the one I've been doing is the first one. That's what we would do as the first exercise when we're practicing the C diminished scale. Now, the diminished scale also has a different name. In the more classical realm, we call it the octatonic scale. And it is used in classical music. I think one of the most, for band people, I think one of the most common uses of the diminished scale, and most blatant for that matter, is that symphony, I think it's Symphony number 2 by James Barnes Chance. The whole thing is that scale. People love that piece too. And that's why it sounds the way it is, because it's a diminished, once again, diminished is a symmetric scale. So there's only 3 of these. There's only 3 diminished scales. For the same reason, right? Well, we don't want that redundancy. We don't want to have to practice it again with just a different name. Okay? Now, the last one that we do as a part of this program, as a part of my method, is the C melodic minor scale. And the difference between the C harmonic minor and C melodic minor is this note here. In the harmonic minor, we have the A flat. In the melodic minor, it's A natural. Okay, so now this is a very common jazz scale. It's got like a dozen different names. I won't go through them all right now. Diminished whole tone is one of those names, and Lydian augmented is one of them, but I'm not going to list all of them. Anyway, so that's a very advanced scale. If you're in my system doing my method, we won't get to that until much later. And the reason for that is I really believe you have to have a firm foundation on these others before you get there. If you jump ahead and just do the hip stuff right away, you don't have a foundation. Now here's where the accumulative system comes in, right? I tell you guys sometimes, I think in some of the other videos, that I teach this thing that I call the art of accumulative practice. And some people have criticized my philosophy here on the accumulative stuff. They have criticized it, saying that it gives people an excuse to not practice. And this is absolutely not true. It's absolutely not true. Now here's the thing. When you make your practice time goal-oriented, you have better motivation than when you're just trying to fill time. The accumulative system was first invented, that philosophy first came about because I was practicing as much as 8 or 9 hours a day, and it still wasn't enough. And that's how I came up with that system, is how do you get this stuff done when there just isn't enough time to do it? So when you're using what I call the art of accumulative practice, you go back to these scales, like what we're looking at here, right? You go back to these scales, and because this can look to you like a lifetime of work. When you look at the system and what I would expect of you before you can go on to the harmonic minor, some people take years to get to the harmonic minor. Other people don't. Now that's what I'm trying to tell you. The reason why and I have another video that you can check out about this, right? I tell you, I think it's called The Only Reason You Should Ever Practice a Lot. And in that video, I talk about if you have something you got to get done, and it's got to be done soon, that's when you should practice a lot. Okay? Now, I'm going to apply that now to these scales. If you want to get through all these scales and have that kind of mastery, and do it in less than 2 or 3 years, 4 years or whatever, you need to practice a lot. That's how this works. So instead of taking 4 or 5 years to master the major scales, do it in 6 months. Instead of taking 4 or 5 years to master the harmonic minor, do it in 6 months. But you got to do that. First of all, you got to be organized to make this work. You got to be organized. We'll talk more about that in some other videos, but you got to be organized to make this work. And second of all, you got to put in the time. Now, with my system, with the scales, you have a certain number of exercises you have to do in a certain order, and you're not ready to go on until you've checked off every one of those in that order on that list. And what I found, here's the cool thing about this. What I found is if you don't do it all in 6 months, you're still getting that same benefit. It's not making you any better to learn it sooner. In fact, in some ways, it makes it worse to learn it sooner, because it's not soaking in as well. The problem is, if you want to get to the more advanced stuff, you're going to have to get the time invested to create that foundation so that you can get to that higher level. I hope that makes sense. That's how we do it. Okay? That's how we do it. So, that's the order. And we would do, by the way, we were looking at that other video, which order should you learn your major scales. The same thing applies to any of the we call it tertian scales. Tertian means based on thirds. In other words, tertian scales are not symmetric. So the tertian scales are the harmonic minor, the pentatonic, and the melodic minor. All of those should be practiced in the same order that we talked about in the other video. Okay? Anyway, if you guys have questions about this, please feel free to ask down in the comments. And this is my method. These are the order of scales that we do. And if you come and take lessons with me, I'll tell you what, out of the hundreds of students that I've taught, I'm going to say that I'm not sure, and I don't remember what I wrote in the blog, so chances are what I say here will contradict what I said in the blog. But I'm thinking about 6 students have worked with me have gotten this far to where they're doing the melodic minor. Just 6. It hasn't been anything more than that. Okay? That's not a reflection on the skill of my students or their dedication. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is it's a lot of work, and a lot of students just don't get that far through it. Now, one thing maybe, oh well, I won't go into that. Anyway, very good. Thank you for hanging out with me, and we'll see you on the next video. God bless you, and have a great day. Thank you for watching this video. I wanted to spend just a minute to let you know that there's a better, more convenient, more organized way to access all of these videos. We have literally hundreds of videos here on YouTube, and quite frankly, it's a bit of a mess. So, to make it a little bit more organized and easier for you to access what you want to access, I created a separate page, a separate area on my website. That's eddielewis.com. And if you go to eddielewis.com, click on the menu, click on videos. It will take you there. I have the videos categorized, and then within those categories, some of them, like the educational videos, you can click on it and go in there and look for the videos specifically that you're looking for. Okay? So go to eddielewis.com, EDDIELEWIS.com. Thank you very much.